week's edition of Tech Sales Advice. I am, of course, your host, Chris White, and this is the LinkedIn Live program for pre-sales professionals, pre-sales leaders. And let me emphasize, these are live conversations. By design, these conversations are unscripted, unrehearsed, and unpredictable. And I am really pleased to welcome this week's guest. She actually hired me when she was in her previous company to speak to her team when I don't think anybody had ever even heard of me or knew what my business was, and somehow she found me and invited me to speak with her team, which was a delight. She and I have stayed in touch, and now she's with a new company and a new job, Miss Lauren Holzer. Lauren, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing well. Thanks, Chris, for having me. This is live and unscripted, which I've told everyone makes me slightly nervous, but I'm very excited.
Well, look, as sales engineers, I mean, most of what we do at least should be somewhat unscripted,
That's
and
right.
well, that's all right. We should rehearse, but we should be prepared to be, unpredictable. So Lauren, you're now the manager of solutions engineering with HubSpot. Congratulations. How long have you been with HubSpot now?
Thank you. I've been with HubSpot almost 6 months now. So,
Wow, gosh, time. By the way, we've already got some people dialing in. So Rob Malta says hello. Samuel Yu says hello. And Heather Garcia says hello. Folks, thank you so much for saying hello. Of course, if you have any questions for Lauren, she said she's nervous, but we all know better. She's a rock star. By the way, I love your colors this morning. That you
oh,
you
thank you.
you you are just radiating spring, and
Yeah,
and that's a very nice thing to see.
that's what
So
I'm going for, the summer vibes.
I'm I'm
Bringing in that
s-
color.
I am so ready for summer. By the way, David Bosque, Davis, good to see you,
Hey,
sir.
David.
So we're going to talk a little bit about women in solutions engineering today. We're going to talk a little bit about just this profession, this role, the great opportunity. I know you love this idea of being open to ideas. We're going to talk about a number of those things. There's a few other questions I'm probably going to ask, but before we get into any of that, Lauren, do you mind taking a minute and sharing how did you get into solutions engineering to begin with? By the way, I just have to continue to call out a hello. Anna says hello, and Michelle says hello. Folks, Claire says hello. So you bring with you quite the fan group, apparently. So
Yeah, I guess I got
folks,
a
it's
fan club, huh? That's
you
pretty
do indeed.
sweet.
It's good to see all of you. We don't see who's online, so please, if you're out there, say hello. So, Lauren, how did you get into sales engineering, or pre-sales, as some of us call it?
Yeah. So I love a pre-sales origin story. And the reason I love it is everybody comes from the most like vastly different place and somehow finds the best career out there.
So true.
So for me, I actually was a music major in college. Thought I was going to be an opera singer for the rest of my life. Graduated and decided, you know what? That is so unrealistic. I will not be an opera singer. I'm okay, but I'm not great. And so I started actually in arts administration. I was kind of
Hmm.
working behind the scenes for an arts festival, doing a couple things like that, and got into fundraising for the arts and loved it. I really did like it. But as I started to grow in my career, I tried to determine what was next. And the part of fundraising I really liked was not necessarily the asking of the money or like the meetings. What I really
Hmm.
loved was the strategizing. Okay,
Interesting.
how are we going to get from A to B? If we need
Yeah.
to raise this much money, what are the things we're going to do to get there? And so
Hmm.
I talked to a friend who sent me to another friend, and she said, "You know what? You should be a solutions engineer." And I was like, "Oh, okay. I don't know what that is." And I said, "I don't think I'm necessarily the most technical person you're going to find." And
Yeah.
she said, "It doesn't matter." And so I interviewed. My manager saw my potential,
Hmm.
and I landed at a company called Blackbot and was there for almost a little over 7 years. So,
Wow.
it kind of ended up being like the perfect fit for me. And the rest is history.
That's such a good story. But by the way, do people ask you to sing any opera from time to time?
No, not anymore. I'm out of the opera game. I do sing in a choir, but
You do.
singing on a demo is not really, ideal, I don't
Okay.
think.
All right. Well, before we end today, I may ask you to belt
Oh
out a
gosh.
tune or two, but only if you're inspired to do so. When you first entered this profession, so a friend of a friend, suggests solutions engineering. You clearly you interviewed your hiring manager, or the leader saw clearly some potential in you. Were you thinking to yourself, what in the world have I gotten myself into? And what were some of your concerns or trepidations going into that new role?
That's a really good question, Chris. I think there's been a lot of talk about imposter syndrome, and I do think it's
Mm,
really real. And when I first started, I thought to myself, what did I get myself into? I don't know the first thing about SQL, which was something that I had to know at the time for our product. I don't
right.
know anything about online marketing, which was a product I supported. I mean, it's all these other things that I just felt like I didn't have a good concept of. But what I figured out is like those little things, like it's kind of the nitty gritty, the like the hard
Mm,
skills, like you got to know how this works and how this button clicks. That stuff is stuff you can learn. But what I
mm,
started to figure out is I had the soft skills. I knew how to talk to
yeah.
customers. I could sell a vision. I could talk about a story and, get someone to kind of understand what their life might look like using something. So those little things I feel like kind of are the things I've always leaned on. I had to identify like that's my strength, that's what I'm going to lean on, and then from there I'll let the other things be things I learn as I go, and that's totally how I've handled it.
So powerful. I mean, just such a great lesson there. Focus on your strengths, leverage your strengths, learn what you maybe areas where you're not as strong. And it sounded for you, the good news was that some of the softer skills, as people sometimes refer to them, that sort of came easy, maybe came naturally to you. And honestly, sometimes those are the hardest skills to learn. I am curious, you mentioned that what you loved about fundraising was the strategy.
Yeah.
Do you find that there's sort of a similarity between sort of the strategy behind a fundraising, maybe objective, and the strategy going into a sales engagement?
100%. It's weird to think about that, but really, when you're fundraising, you're almost selling a vision to somebody, right?
Mm,
And you're kind of helping them identify the path they want to go on their philanthropic journey. And
yeah,
so you're kind of working with them to figure out what are their priorities, where do they really want to dedicate their resources, and then how are you going to help execute that? And that's
yeah,
exactly what you do as a solutions engineer, right? You're showing them sort of what the vision will look like. You find out really what it is they want, where they want to go, and then you strategize with them how to get there. And so I think they're actually really oddly very much related. And the whole journey that you take together is very much the same. And when you think about software sales, you are selling a vision, right? Because you're not necessarily saying, okay, try this out for 50 days and see how it goes, right? And you're not doing it's the same thing with a donor. So you're really kind of saying,
mm,
well, donor, if you help us do this, we're going to have this program and it's going to have this impact. Same thing with software. If you think you want to commit to this is the impact it's going to have on your business. So it's sort of a similar path, actually, oddly enough.
yeah. Well, and it's interesting to me. I don't know if I ever pause long enough to think about the 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 strategy, the planning, the thinking that goes behind fundraising.
Yeah.
Just like when I first got into sales, I didn't think about the strategy and the process that went into a sales. And in fact, many people have heard me say the first time I heard sales and process used in the same sentence, I had no idea what they were talking about. What do you mean there's a process to this? Like, I just thought we just showed up and did our thing. I think I probably thought that about fundraising. Like, I don't know, just get out there and you sort of do it. So of course there's a process. But by the way, Lauren, I have to just pause and acknowledge a number of people, Anthony and Hannah and my good friend Tony Franchetta. Good to see you. Katie Rose agrees with me. We need to hear the voice.
Oh,
I hope I'm not sure. Do you know how to
medulla,
pronounce it?
medulla.
Medulla, and Samuel. Just folks, thank you so much for all the comments.
Well, Sam,
And
you
and
have
and
good soft skills. You're one of the best SEs I know too.
there you go. There you go. So you're now in this position, and you're leveraging your soft skills. You're sort of starting to develop, quote, the harder skills. At what point, because when you and I met, you were already a manager. So at what point did you make that shift into management?
Yeah. So for years, I would have the ear of my manager and I would say, Stephanie, we should be doing this, or I see opportunity here, or there's something that we could be doing better here. And I just kind of always had an organizational mind. I think it was, of course, my focus was always on my deals and the strategy behind my individual deals. But at the end of the day, I was constantly thinking organizationally and how can we impact the business more. So a manager opportunity opened up. I had actually just had my daughter like 6 months earlier, or maybe a year earlier, and I was kind of trying to get back into the swing of things, finding my rhythm. And Stephanie said, "Listen, there's a management position opening up. I think you'd be great." She said, "We want you to do that." And I said, "Are you crazy? I don't think that's a great idea." Kind of like when I did it the first time with solutions engineering. And she said, "Yes, you're going to be great." And I'm so glad she pushed me in that direction because it really has been life changing for me. I really love the organizational side of looking at solutions engineering and how we can better impact the sales organization, how I can help grow other solutions engineers, and all of that coming together has been really beneficial.
What about that role was scary, or
Yeah.
why were you reluctant? Because it sounded like you had that mindset already. You in fact, I even wrote it down. You had an organizational mind, right? You weren't only just thinking, how can I close more deals for myself? How can I help obviously the customers, but what can I do, or what can we do to better the company, as a whole? What was it that made you reluctant of taking
Yeah.
that job?
Well, I'll be transparent and vulnerable here. I thought, first of all, how could I possibly lead other people? Like, I don't know what I'm
Mm,
doing day to day, right? And everybody, I think
mm,
everybody feels like that, but I think I'm ultra critical of myself. So I thought, how could I
mm,
be a leader,
yeah.
And then, I also honestly thought about how am I going to balance my family life with being a manager at a larger company with a team that's going to depend on me. And that scared the bejesus out of me. When you have an individual deal, you can kind of manipulate your time a little bit differently. But when you got like 8 or 9, 10 people that are depending on you every single day, like how was I going to manage that? And so I think that was really the scariest part for me, was really that work life, family life balance, how I was going to make that work, and how could I be a good leader while doing that.
Yeah. And what were some of the lessons you learned early on that sort of helped you cope with that concern, that stress, and help you sort of overcome that challenge?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I learned about 8,000 lessons. Anybody who was on my team my first year that might be watching can remember all the lessons we learned together as a team.
Mm,
Well, I'll tell you a
yeah.
couple of things that I learned right off the bat. So one of them was your team are the people that know what's going on. They're going to be the
Mm,
ones coming up with the ideas now. It's not about my ideas and my things and what I'm doing. It's about them. And
mm,
they're the ones who actually know, like, what's happening, and they're the ones who are going to be taking us to the next level. So
mm,
I really learned that very early. Another thing that I learned was it is okay to be yourself. I was trying to be every other manager that I had had before or that was on my
mm,
team, and trying to be those people. I was not being authentic. And I quickly learned that being inauthentic makes you definitely not efficient. No one's going to trust you. You're not a leader. So those two big things, I think, really changed the game for me. And when I started being my authentic self, who is silly, who is vulnerable, who is transparent, and sometimes disorganized, everyone could kind of understand, like, okay, I see where Lauren's going. Let's get behind her. And that really was a game changer.
I mean, those words are so powerful. I'm going to repeat some of what you said. And by the way, for those of you who may have just joined, I'm speaking with Lauren Holzer. She's a manager of solutions engineering with Hubspot, spent 7 years with Blackbaud, and is sharing some of her experience. The two things you just mentioned, Lauren, that struck a chord with me so much. It's not about me, it's about them, right? And that applies to, I mean, honestly, the more we can apply that to every part of our life, much less our job, but certainly when we are presenting and meeting with customers, right? I mean, one of the things I like to tell people, one of the problems with your product demonstration is that it's all about your product, right?
Right.
And it needs to be about the customer, right? It needs to be about them, not us. And particularly in dealing with a team, when we move into management, it's no longer, our success is their success, right?
Yep.
And then the second thing, be yourself, be authentic.
Yeah.
Such powerful words. So you mentioned you actually use the word ideas, and I love this idea that, hey, you know what, it's now my team that's out in the field, they're closer to the customer, they're delivering the demos, the workshops, etc. And I know one of your sort of ideas that you wanted, or topics that you wanted to touch on, is this notion of being open to new ideas.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that, and why is that so important to you?
Yeah. So you think about solutions engineering, right? You have to be evolving. Your product's evolving, your
Mm,
customers are evolving, the market's evolving, your business is evolving. And if you do the same thing every single day and you're not evolving, you're going nowhere. You're just going to
amen.
be peddling water. You're never going to be successful. And neither are your customers, for in all honesty. So, for me, one of the things I've always really challenged myself to do is, first of all, evaluate what I've been doing. How's it going? Check
Yeah,
in.
yeah,
Is it going well? I don't know. If I don't know, then it's something I need to think about. If I can
yeah.
tell it's not going well, let's think about how it might go well. So I think it's really important to evaluate how things are going and then start to think about opportunities and take advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah.
You got to think from an organizational standpoint, like how is this going to impact my customers, my sales team, my manager? And then start trying things out. Like, don't be afraid to be different. Don't be afraid to try different things. But I think ideas are what has really made this career for a lot of people so much fun, because the more you can think of new ideas on how to talk about your product, work with your sales team, the more you can evolve as a person and the more you can evolve your business.
I so love that. And the word that comes to mind, Lauren, hearing you say that, is the word courage.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes some courage to break out of the routine, right? To break, particularly if it involves presenting or demonstrating, or working in a very public environment, right? Which is what we do,
Yeah.
right? But you're so right. I mean, let's not do the same old boring demo. Let's
Yeah.
change it up. Let's be willing to try new things. By the way, you might fail a time or two. That's okay, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's how we learn.
Yep.
By the way, I do just want to say a quick shout out to a few of the folks that are
Hey,
chiming in.
Shane.
Shane and Samuel again. Samuel, love hearing from you. Laurel, Daryl's on with us. Daryl, nice to see you. And Rob, giving you a shout out for
Thanks,
some of that
Rob.
advice. Folks, it's so nice to hear from you. I encourage you to continue to share. It's nice to know that
Feeling the love.
we've yeah, you're feeling the love, right? Um, you mentioned evaluate. You said
Mhm.
that, in order to evolve, we really need to sort of, the way I interpret that is we need to be able to press the pause button on some regular basis and evaluate how we're doing. Now, as a manager of a solutions engineering team, one of the things that people talk about a lot these days are KPIs
Yeah.
and metrics. Are there certain KPIs and metrics that you use to evaluate the team, evaluate the performance, et cetera?
Okay, I'm really glad you asked that question. And I've been thinking a lot about this. My team in general, my management team, we've been thinking a lot about how are we measuring success? How are we making sure that's aligning with the sales team? So I kind of have two sides of it that I've been thinking about. There's KPIs. So
Mm,
there's things like I look at win rate. I look at how many engagements you're participating in per deal. We're
yeah.
looking at things like, if how much MRR or ARR are you
Yep.
selling compared
Yep.
to those on your same market segment. I'm also looking at things like how are the AEs and the sales team giving me feedback? Is that feedback positive? What does that stuff look like?
Mm,
So that kind of starts to bridge into the qualitative part of
mm,
the job, right? And I think as an individual contributor, you got to look at the KPIs that I just mentioned, things like that. But we also have to look at the qualitative part. How does it feel when I'm talking to my customer? How's my customer interacting? Does my customer
mm,
feel empowered? When I have these conversations with my customer, am I leaving feeling like I know where my customer is Are they on the right page? Are we on
Mm,
two different pages? Do I even know what page they're on? Those types of things. Also, do I feel like my message was like communicated well? Did my message get across? Those are things that we should be asking ourselves every single time we're on a sales call. And I also believe we should also make sure we're listening, because I think that as solutions engineers, we're very good at talking, we're very good at presenting. As a former opera singer, I love to be on the stage, but I had to really learn how to listen to my customers. And Shane, who's on this call, he's one of the AEs I worked with for years, but he certainly taught me a lot about that. Like, what is this customer really trying to get out of us, right?
yeah.
And how can I help that customer get on the same page as us? And he and I would just sit around and strategize, like, okay, this customer really wants to get here. How do we help them get there? And
Mm.
let's go listen to them. Let's just take some time, sit there and listen. And I think those are some things, like if you can't remember what your customer said in the call an hour ago, you clearly weren't listening, right? And so those are qualitative things I think you need to think about when you're evaluating yourself. And those are things that you need to really take to heart.
Y- y- you're giving me so many ideas. I want to ask you like 5 follow-on
That's
questions
great.
all at once. So I'm not
Okay.
sure where to go first. But I do want to double click on this idea of KPIs.
Yeah.
So to me, KPIs are sort of, that's the quantitative measure. But
Hmm.
then what you're also saying is the qualitative measure. One of the terms, in fact, it's you could almost call it a field, but that sounds too like technical to me. But this notion of pre-sales sentiment or SE sentiment in the context of a deal, right? And that's sort of what you're saying, right? How do we feel after a discovery conversation? How do we feel about this engagement, right? How do we feel about their interest level, their how serious they are? How do we feel about how good of a fit this is, etc.? Now, do you all track anything like that in the
Yeah.
context of your deals?
Well, that's actually, I think every single SE organization is trying to figure out and put their finger on exactly how do we track that and what do we want to track about that. We're working on how to track complexity, so deal complexity. How do we
Mm,
determine, maybe even looking at the deal itself before we even, touch it? How
yeah,
complex is this deal? So we're working on ways to start evaluating
like that.
that and
Yeah,
rating different deals on complexity to try to find similarities across the board, so we can say, oh, if it has this product in it, that we typically rank that as a 5 out of 5 for complexity.
yeah,
So that's one of the things. But something I'd really like to start thinking about too is, okay, how great of a fit is this for our
yeah,
client? Let's rate it in the beginning with the information
yeah,
we know from our first discovery, and then see how that needle might move when pre-sales gets involved. And
yeah,
that needle might move to it's not a good fit at all, which is great, because then the customer's going to be happy. The AE is
yeah,
not spinning their wheels. We need to get to
totally.
the point where we're eliminating deals that are not good fits. So that's
Amen.
another thing that I've really been thinking about. How can we get there?
Yeah. It's interesting you should mention that. I've only shared this idea with a few people, and obviously I'll share it now. And who knows how many people will hear it now. But we have this notion of MQL,
Yeah.
marketing qualified lead. We have this notion of SQL, sales qualified lead. Not like the SQL that you had to learn. When you first joined Blackbaud. We even have the term SAL, right? Sales accepted lead.
Uh-huh.
Why do we not have PSQL? Pre-sales qualified lead,
Yeah.
right? Like that
Right.
doesn't usually enter that's typically not an actual gate. I'm in vision, you talk about selling the vision. I have this vision that someday that will also be one of the gates in a sales engagement, workflow that pre-sales would have to qualify before we can move forward,
Chris,
right?
that's an amazing idea. That's kind of something that I started to work on at Blackbud. How do we kind of get to that point? And at Hubspot, what we've done is we've created almost, it's not a gate necessarily as far as qualification, but it's basically once we're engaged, are we moving on to the business part? So once
Mm,
solutions engineering is coming in at the early end, we want to make sure all the technical check boxes can be checked, make sure that the team at the organization we're working with like understands that these are the technical implications. At that point, pre-sales is going to say, yep, we're going, you guys can go forward now to the business considerations. And
Love
then
that.
the second part of that is really the business considerations. And we do that for a number of reasons. But as I already mentioned, it's really about the customer. Do we
Yeah,
want the customer to take a product that they're not going to be successful with? Absolutely not. That's
yeah,
not good for anybody, and including,
exactly.
honestly, selfishly, sales. Like,
Yeah.
we need to have those renewals, and we want to grow those accounts. So in general, that's kind of the direction we're going. So I love that.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, if the customer's not successful, who are they blaming? Or what are they
Exactly.
blaming? The product, right?
Right.
It's never the customer's fault, right?
No.
It's
Yeah.
always the product's fault, right?
Yeah.
When, maybe it wasn't a good fit to begin with. So,
Yeah.
Lauren, let's push our own pause button for just a moment in case anybody has joined in just the past few minutes. Folks, I'm speaking with Lauren Holzer. She is a manager of solutions engineering with Hubspot. If you've been listening for any length of time, you can tell already she's an absolute rock star, and she's already dropped enough noteworthy ideas on us that we could put a bow on it and call it a day. But we're not going to do that just yet. I invited her to spend an hour with us, so we got another 30 minutes. If you care to ask Lauren any questions or say hello, please feel free to do so. So Lauren, I'm going to shift gears ever so slightly,
Yeah.
and there's actually 3 or 4 more questions I wanted to, but there's some other things we're going to talk about.
Okay.
You mentioned again KPIs and the qualitative and more sort of the sentiment, or sort of the, I would say that more feelings
Yeah.
about an engagement or feelings about how the team is operating. And the other term that came to mind was intuition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that, to me, there's a certain, right? There's, what are the numbers telling you? But then what is your intuition telling you?
Yeah.
And when I hear that, I can't help but think of women, and I can't help but think of the term like a mother's intuition. And I know one of the things we're going to touch on is women in this role. And based on a recent conversation you and I had, you said, Chris, I just think there are certain things that about women that they're naturally, motherly, and that makes them very well suited for this role. Let's talk about this a little bit. What is it that you think make women so well suited for this profession?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think in general, diversity in solutions engineering is super important because it means that we're bringing perspectives from all the different, diverse backgrounds that these people have. And women in particular are underrepresented in solutions engineering, right?
No
And
doubt.
so I've been personally working toward helping empower women to not only get into the field but then move into leadership, because the
Mm,
more female leaders we have, of course, the better we will be, from a diversity standpoint. And I'm really fortunate to have worked for amazing women in the past. But when it comes to women in solutions engineering, I think women do bring something really special to the role. I think a lot of times our experiences, maybe in our past professional life, or in our school or wherever we came from, do give us a sort of different perspective. For
yeah.
example, sometimes I've been overlooked for opportunities because I'm a female, right?
Mm,
Feel like sometimes I have to be a little bit louder because I'm a female.
mm.
And anyone who's listening to me is like, Lauren, you can't be any louder, but I can maybe. And So I think the thing that kind of lends to solutions engineering is bringing extra empathy on the phone. When we're talking to a team, maybe it is
Mm,
another woman, right? We're going to pull that out and we're going to listen and we're going to be extra empathetic on their experience and how they're experiencing whatever pain they're having in their business. I also do think that multitasking is something innate as a mother. And
mm,
as a mother, I am constantly thinking about 7,000 things in my head, checking 40,000 boxes off while
mm.
I'm going, to the store, let alone doing anything else bigger.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's another part that solutions engineering, it really lends well to solutions engineering, because when you're a solutions engineer, you got to be on the fly. You got to be ready to take what questions, objections,
Yeah.
complicated scenarios someone's throwing at you, and you got to have all that thought going through your head. So I do think that's another thing that really lends well. And I don't know, a lot of my ladies, we just work our butts off. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's another quality that a lot of women bring.
I mean, so much of what you said strikes such a chord. I mean, the first thing you said is just this notion of diversity. I couldn't agree more. And look, I'm being very transparent. I'm a white male in his mid 50s, right? I mean, so I'm the opposite of diverse, but I can say that a number of workshops that I've run, I've had a group, I've been staring at a group of people that look a lot like me.
Yeah.
And those workshops that do involve certainly more women in particular, there is a more rounder sort of collection or broader collection of ideas and certainly personalities. And you use the word empathy. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I just think women tend to have a more sort of natural empathetic nature, and I think that goes a long way in a sales organization and as a sales leader. And the multitasking, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm already imagining you driving to the store with two little ones in the back, right? And you're probably talking on the phone and trying to give someone a little a juice box or something, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean there's a lot going on. So no, and look, I know for me, I would say I've probably learned the most in my career from women that I have worked for. Um, Honestly, and one of the reasons is because, and I respect this a great deal, they seem to be less reluctant to just tell it like it is and give it to me
Yeah.
straight and give some of the best advice I've gotten in my career have come from women that I have worked with. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the maternal instincts coming out or what, but I think there's a lot to be said for
I
that.
think if there's like, if you have the ability to be vulnerable and authentic, going back to that,
Mm,
that is a huge part of being a great leader, being a good solutions engineer, being good anything, right?
yeah.
And so I think that vulnerability, I think, at least for me as a female, I brought that vulnerability to work. And I even said it here, like going into management was scary for me. Like those types of things, though, make you who you are. And being
Yeah.
that person, and saying, I am a little vulnerable here. I'm not sure how this is going to go. But all of that lends to success
Yeah.
and constant evaluation of yourself. How can I be better? How can I constantly improve myself? And I don't know. I just think that's innate for me. I think it's innate for a lot of females that I work with, that I'm friends with. And I think we're just always pushing ourselves to the next level, which is important.
Yeah. What advice would you have for any women who might be out there right now or might listen to this, in recording, who might, maybe they've reached a point in their career and they're not sure if they should take the next step. Maybe they're afraid to be vulnerable. Any advice that you would have for someone in
Yeah.
that situation?
Totally. Statistically, women are the last ones to ask for a raise. We're the last
Mm,
ones to say we're qualified for a job when we might think we're maybe not qualified. And I want to remind those women out there that there's a guy in the next house or office over who saw that job description and thought, I'm not super qualified, but I'm going to go for it. So I think
mm,
my advice is just be confident. Just put yourself out there. I'll be completely honest. When I applied for this job at HubSpot, I was like, there is no way they're going to hire me. But I'm so glad they did. And I'm so glad I had this opportunity. And I'm so glad that, it really was the right fit for me. And I'm so glad I put my application in there and I put my name out there. So, same thing at Blindbot. I didn't think I was qualified. I didn't think I was going to do it. But I would just say be confident. Like, know that what you think you can do, you can do.
mm.
And no one's going to judge you because you submitted an application to a job or you asked for a raise. That's another topic, but always be willing to talk about compensation with your managers. That's important. But I think all that stuff is something that you have to just put yourself out there and go for it.
You use the words "no one's going to judge." Do you think that's part of what gets in people's way is fear of being judged, fear of maybe being, put in a box?
Yeah, totally. And fear of failure. Who wants to
Mm,
fail, right?
yeah.
And I hate failing. failing stinks. I'm not good at it, but
Mm,
I've learned how to be better, right? And I think it's something that we're just always trying to avoid. But
yeah,
don't avoid it. Try to lean into it. And you know what? When you fail, that's the time that you learn something.
yeah.
So, if you don't get that job, well, what is it about, how I went about it, or what is it about the job or the company or the interview process that I didn't nail, and do it better next time.
Yeah, yeah, really, really well said. By the way, you have someone, Roman is chiming in. 100% glad to have you. Roman, it's nice to hear from you. Folks, I am speaking to Lauren Holzer. She's manager of solutions engineering with Hubspot. If you do have any comments or questions, I invite you to put them in. As you can see, we've had quite a few comments flowing. Lauren, let's dig into this idea, or the fact that you've now just made this change. I think you said you've been there about what, six? You said it's been about 6 months, 9 months,
Yeah,
something
I
like
think
that.
all 6 months now that
Yeah,
I'm
six
thinking of it.
months.
Yeah.
So a lot of people have been making, job changes recently.
Yeah.
They're referring to this. I think it's pretty well established. The Great Resignation. What have you done to help you make that transition? My guess is you've been very intentional about it. Everything that I have learned about you tells me that you live your life with focus and intention and strategy and planning. Are there specific things that you did sort of during and throughout this transition to specifically help you make a smooth transition?
Yeah. Chris, that's a really nice compliment. I do try to live with intention. I try not to do things without intention. And so I appreciate that you picked up on that. Um, you know what I'll say, and I will go all the way to the application process. When I decided that I wasn't sure that Blackbaud was going to be my forever,
Yeah.
I had to really think about the whys and then
Mm,
decide what kind of job I wanted next. And that was a long process for me. A lot of painstaking conversations with my manager, my friends, my husband was probably way overhearing about it. But I had to really think about where I wanted to land. And so I
yeah.
think I bring that up because I think it's really important to have that in mind. What are the pros and cons? Where do I want to go? So that's really what did lead me to HubSpot. I when I say I didn't apply to many places, I mean it. I really did not apply to very many places. I thought if this is going to happen, it's going to happen at one of these couple places, and it did happen at HubSpot, and it is the right fit for me. So
Mm,
that prep work does really lend into a successful, implementation, I guess,
yeah.
as you're going into the job. But then, when you start going into the job, meet everybody, put your name out
Mm,
there, be as friendly as you can be, and just try to meet everybody, have coffee chats with people. Make sure that
mm,
you can get to know your team that you're working with on a day to day. And then as a manager, the people that are going to be your individual contributors.
mm.
I really think people are key because if you meet the people and the people know you, and you start to become a part of the team, that's like sort of your first um, line of defense, right? Like, hey, I don't know how to submit PTO. How can can you help me with that?
Yeah.
The more you know kind of the people, the more you'll get the organization. I'd also say I read a couple books about starting a new job because it had been almost 8 years
Yeah.
since I started a new job. And some of those things said, like set out some goals. How do you want to do this job differently? And I wrote it out. I was
Mm,
intentional about writing those things out, what I wanted to be different at this job in this place. And then I am reflecting like crazy every
mm,
30, 60, 90, now 6 months, and I will do it again 30, 60, 90 in year. I think it's important to go back, see what's worked, what hasn't, and then also where are you slipping. I'll
mm,
already admit it. At 6 months, I'm already feeling like I'm a little disorganized. So I have to get back to the basics. How do I get back to my organization that I had established? Thank God, Mardula, who's on here, she's actually been keeping me very organized lately. But there's a lot of people that, kind of help you with those things as you're checking in. So I think those little things have to be evaluated, and you constantly need to check in on yourself and see what's working and what's not.
and again, I'm going to go back to one of the first things you said, that it really started with the job application process
Yeah,
itself,
it
and
did.
you started with the why, right? And you focus there, and what is it that you need from a job? What is it that you have to bring to a job, right? And really to the company. And you mentioned, earlier, I even wrote it down, and having an organizational mindset. I'm sure you approached this with an organizational mindset. Now,
Yeah.
you said that there were a couple things about this that proved to be a perfect fit. I'm
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear what were some of those things, or what are some of those things that either has made this the perfect fit, or made it appear to be the perfect fit, that inspired you to apply to begin with.
Yeah. Well, at HubSpot, we live by heart, which is our culture code. And our culture code has a lot of things like H is for humility, right? Humility is
Mm,
really important to me. Don't walk into a room like you know everything, because you don't. You never will. Nobody ever
so
will.
good.
So that has been
Mm,
really important to me. And every single person I've met has a level of humility at HubSpot that I just really, really appreciate. E is for empathy. I've already talked about empathy and how important it is. It's important with customers, but it's important internally. A is for adaptability. So you got to be really adaptable. And R is for remarkable. I personally think I'm just so remarkable, but no.
you are.
But I do think everyone I work with is remarkable. I did tell my husband the first week that I started, I said, "Oh my gosh, everyone's so smart here." But it's so amazing because I'm learning so much. I'm gaining so much. I just feel like
Awesome.
everyone is remarkable. And it's been wonderful to just absorb all of that remarkability from people. And then the T is for transparency. I truly
Mm,
believe in transparency organizationally
mm.
and, as a person, and I can lead my team with transparency. My team is transparent with me, and that's just a big part of like who I am and how I work. So all of those things were truly things that I loved about my last team that I wanted to have my second chapter of solutions engineering.
Mm. I must admit, I don't think I've ever heard of that sort of organizational mantra, HEART, at HubSpot. I want
Yeah.
to make sure I got it right. Humble, empathetic,
Hmm.
authentic. What?
Adaptable.
Oh,
Exactly.
adaptable. Oh, adaptable. Okay. See, I can be adaptable. Okay, adaptable, remarkable, and transparent.
That's right.
I love that. By the way, I'm never going to think of it as you so sold me on this idea of humility. I'm never going to think of it as HubSpot anymore. From now on, it's Humble Spot. That's the way I'm
Nice.
gonna think of HubSpot. By the way, I am a customer, so
Oh,
I
good.
recently just moved my CRM over to HubSpot. So
Oh,
I,
that's awesome.
I've got my own pipeline set up in HubSpot, and I'm actually still trying to figure some things out. So I may have to give you a call
Yeah, go
on a
ahead.
totally different
I'll
conversation.
send you to someone on my team because I would not know the answer, but
Perfect, perfect. Well, no, I
outsourcing, there
won't,
you
I
go.
won't, I won't bother your team with my, small little challenges. But I am cutting my teeth on HubSpot, so
Awesome.
that's a very good thing. Um, there was something else I was going to ask you, and I completely I completely derailed myself.
Oh,
So you've made this transition. It
mhm.
sounds like you've been very intentional about that, as I would expect. I am curious, and this is going to start tying some of the things. I assume you're all using your own platform to manage
Yeah.
your own opportunities. Do you use anything else to help you manage the pre-sales team, or do you have maybe your own sort of collection of information and KPIs in HubSpot just for you and your fellow SE leaders and managers?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, organizationally, we don't have anything specifically dedicated to solutions engineering, like a software that helps like manage our operations outside of HubSpot. So, we do
Yep.
have, ways that we use the HubSpot database to put in solutions engineering requests from sales, manage
Yeah.
our reports, that type of thing. We're really fortunate to have our own operations team that helps us with reporting, that helps us with enablement, that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
in that sense, my job is much easier. But we're also so fortunate because it gives us the opportunity to really reflect on what we want, what we need, and what will help us be successful. We do use like Looker reports for, taking the data out of HubSpot and putting it into a
Yeah.
different kind of view. But yeah, not right now. We're not really using any kind of solutions
Okay.
engineering specific stuff. Now, I have ideas, but I'm not going to put them out there on LinkedIn Live because I don't want my inbox to be blown up by
Yes,
different.
well, and I don't know if you saw, I recently, in collaboration with a gentleman named Kerry Sokolsky, we recently published
Yeah,
something called the Pre-Sales Buyer's Guide. So there's a lot of information out there if you care to take a look at that. Um,
I did look at that, and
you
I love
did.
that because it's daunting as a pre-sales professional with all the technology that's come out. I did implement a demo automation platform at
You did.
Blackbaud, and that was really awesome and successful. But going through that evaluation process was overwhelming. So
It's
thanks for
painful.
providing that resource.
Yes, of course, of course. So, Lauren, if you can believe it, we've been at this for almost 50 minutes
I can't believe
already.
it.
I know, and you, as I knew you would be, you have just been, first of all, just a delight, but also a rock star full of great information and ideas and insights. So I really appreciate that. Can I indulge you for about 10 more minutes? Are you good for about 10 more minutes?
Yeah,
Okay. So
that's great.
folks, if you want to hang around for, we're gonna go about 10 minutes and we'll land this plane. I'm going to ask just one final sort of open question, and then I've got a bit of a lightning round question. So I've got a series of questions in lightning round
Okay.
fashion. So the final question I wanted to ask you, I don't know if you recall this, but when you invited me to speak for your team at Blackbaud,
Yeah.
the focus was discovery.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, and at the time, I remember you saying that you just felt like discovery was really the most important, and that if we didn't get the discovery right, the rest of the sales engagement was built on a poor foundation.
Yeah.
Do you still see it the same way? And has your thinking around discovery evolved at all since we did that a couple years ago?
Oh, I totally see it the same way. And I definitely think discovery is key to a successful sale, a successful customer, and a successful pre-sales org.
Mm,
I think that if you don't have a good discovery and you're not listening to what the client needs, you're not making sure you're asking the right questions to find any pitfalls that they might experience, you're doing the customer disservice. So
yeah,
first off, I think that's super important. And I also think the discovery part AEs love to kind of brush over that, right? Let's brush over that part. But I think we need to stop and pause and make sure we know exactly what they're looking for, what their goals are, because at the end of the sale, when we go back to their goals, we can talk about those goals. We can bring it up. You told me you wanted to get from A to B. You told me you can't get from A to B doing what you're doing today. What are you going to do to get from A to B if you don't go with our solution? And at the end of the day, that's how you get there, right? And then you're ironing out all the other pieces, but that's the most important part at the very end.
amen. Well, and look, one of the reasons AEs are reluctant at times to do discovery is speed, right? They
Yeah,
don't want to slow the process down.
yeah,
The truth is that it may delay when we can show some product, but usually it speeds up a successful
it does.
deal,
If
right?
the more you slow it down in the beginning, the faster it'll go at the end. I also think AEs are reluctant because of risk. If
Yeah,
I ask that question, it might mean they're not the right fit. And you want to put the risk out as early as you possibly can because the
totally.
earlier we identify the risk is not going to come up later. You don't want when the customer is about to sign, like think about buying a car. When you go to buy a car, you don't want the person that you're buying the car from at the very last minute when you're about to put your signature at the bottom of the 1,000 papers you sign when you buy a car that I'm sorry, the engine's actually 45 years old. It's from an old car, but we put it in there. It should be fine.
Right.
Wait, hold up. It's going to make you question everything you had learned about
Totally.
that car the entire time. So
Totally.
you really need to make sure you mitigate all of
Mm,
that at the beginning so you build that trust. And at the end, that risk when they are worried about, oh my gosh, I'm about to sign over all this money for this product and I got to put my neck on the line for my manager. That's the point when you want them to trust you and be ready to go.
totally. By the way, did you just compare us to used car sales professionals?
I did not mean to. That was not what I was trying to say. But I hate buying cars. That's like my least favorite purchase.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's why I. Think of that
No,
way.
no, no. It's an easy analogy to use, so I
Yeah.
totally understand. Lauren, I'm going to ask you just three quick questions,
Okay.
sort of the lightning round here. The first question of the three is, did you receive any advice, or as you think back on your career,
Mhm.
was there any advice that you received along the journey that made a significant impact or has really stuck with you? And if so, what?
I mean, aside from go into solutions engineering, I think one of my managers, Christine, who might be listening today, Christine, she once told me, she's like, Lauren, you do have good ideas. Like, you can understand the business, you have those good ideas, and you see things that some other people just don't see. And I think that's not necessarily advice, but it was really good feedback because I question myself
Mm,
sometimes, and I think she
mm,
knows that. And so she was trying to help me like understand that like this is my knack. Like you got that, I can do that. And so I think for me that was really really good advice. She also told me to slow down. I know you want
mm,
this to happen, but you got to slow down to make it happen, and you got to bring everybody along with you. You got to look behind you sometimes, and that has stuck with
mm.
me. That's probably more recent information she gave me,
It's
but I'm
good.
really glad she did because it's something that I've really taken to heart, and I think about who's behind me right now, because sometimes there's no one.
Yeah.
So you do have to bring your stakeholders along.
It's really well. It's really well said. By the way, there's a term that look behind you. I don't know if you've ever heard the term "check your six," but
Mm.
I actually think it's a fighter pilot term. 12 o'clock being straight ahead of you, 6 o'clock being behind
Oh,
you. The term "check your six" is you got to look over your backs once in a while, right?
yep,
You got to look behind you. So check your six.
love it.
That's the term. So um, the other thought that I had, there was another thought that I had that had escaped me when you were anyway. All right, I'm going to move on.
Okay.
The next question. So we talked about what advice that you've received along the journey. I'm going to turn the tables on you now. Let's just say, for example, I walk into the elevator and there you are, and I turn to you and say, "Oh my goodness, Lauren, I just saw you on LinkedIn Live the other day. I have just started my first role as a pre-sales engineer. Any advice for me?" And we've got maybe 30 to 60 seconds in the elevator.
Any more advice? I would say be yourself. If you're yourself with your customer and your AEs, and you bring that empathy and humility with you, that and then be curious. All of those
Mm,
little components of yourself, and making sure that you're being curious and you're being empathetic and you're bringing that humility, you're going to be successful. Those are the keys, I think, to a successful solutions engineer.
absolutely love that. Yeah, be yourself, be authentic, be curious. By the way, have you seen Ted Lasso?
Yes, I love Ted Lasso
Okay, do
so
you
much.
remember the dart scene where
Mm-hmm.
he beats
Yes.
whatever and he says, "Be curious,
Yep.
not judgmental." Love that scene. All right, final question.
Okay.
If you could ask me one question, what might that be?
Ooh, Chris, that's a hard one. Um, hmm. What do you think, from all the companies that you've worked with now,
Hmm.
what do you think is like the most pervasive problem that you see in these companies?
Are
If you,
we're talking? I assume we're talking pre-sales.
yeah, pre-sales, pre-sales.
Wow, that the most pervasive problem. I mean, the first thing that comes, there's probably two things that comes to mind. The first thing that comes to mind is really what you were saying when you were talking about moving into management, where we have to make it all about them and not us.
Yeah,
We have to make every conversation with customers about them and not us and our products. I
yeah,
mean, we just get so wrapped up in our products, right?
yeah,
By the way, in a very innocent and natural way. Why? What does enablement teach us? Products, right?
yeah,
Positioning, solutioning, right? It's all about we are swimming in a pool of us, and then yet we have to go out and speak to customers, and we have to put us second, right? We have to clear our cache and focus on them. It's just hard. particularly if you're like you've clearly developed a passion for HubSpot, right?
Yeah.
If you're passionate about your solution and your product, it's hard to put that on the on the second tier. So the second thing that comes to mind is the AE-SE relationship.
Oh, yeah.
That is just fundamentally. I mean, we're wired differently. We think differently, and yet we're paired together to do the most important things in business, right? And we're passionate, and so those are probably the two things that come to mind for me is getting so wrapped up in our product and then just collaborating with sales. So
Yeah. I love it.
very, very good question. Lauren, we literally have 2 more minutes. So any final words from you in closing?
No, Chris, I want to thank you. This was super, super fun. I am really glad that you invited me to do this. It means a lot to me, but I also want to thank everybody that joined from my team, from teams in the past, from people that I don't know. Thanks for joining. And if you ever do have questions or want advice or just to chat about solutions engineering, ping me in my LinkedIn inbox. I'd love to chat with you. But yeah, Chris, I'd love to have the opportunity to chat with you again. This has been super fun.
Excellent. Well, Lauren, you are definitely going to be invited back to be a repeat guest. You've been a delight and a rock star. You've got so much energy. You are still reasonably young in your career, so I'm excited to watch you in your career. I have a feeling you've got quite a few more steps that you're going to take in your career. So thank you so much for being here, folks. I'll echo Lauren's sentiments. Thank you so much for joining. Looks like we had a really great audience today. Lots of good comments and feedback. By the way, I'm always reminded by my colleagues to make a mention. If you like this program, you can follow hashtag Tech Sales Advice to get alerts. You can also see previous episodes if you care to. You can also go to techsalesadvisors.com to learn more about the training that we do. And of course, you can go to demodoctor.com to get some online training. Lauren, really nice to see you again. Thank you so much for being here. Hang around just for a minute so I can give you your parting gift. To everybody else, thank you so much for being here. We'll see you next time.
Guys. Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.